The streets of Whitechapel groaned under the weight of unspoken dread. The autumn air felt thick, stifling, as though the very fog that rolled through the alleys had come alive with menace, wrapping its cold fingers around the hearts of the people. The stone cobbles, slick with dew and the remnants of a long day's grime, seemed to shift beneath the feet of those who walked them. Women with hurried steps, their skirts brushing the ground, heads down, eyes flickering nervously at the shadows. There was no safety in these streets. No escape. No place to hide. The predator was there, lurking just beyond the veil of darkness. They knew it. He knew it. Everyone knew it. The Ripper, an invisible monster, his presence suffocating the life out of the city one breath at a time. Before we dive into today's chilling tale, take a moment to comment below where you're watching from, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button so you never miss another gripping unknown crime story. On the night of September 29, 1888, Catherine Eddowes stepped into that same fog, her steps unsteady, her mind clouded with the remnants of liquor. A few hours earlier she had been locked in a cell, arrested for drunkenness. Now, released back into the night with nothing but the cool air in her lungs, she was nothing more than a figure swallowed by the endless shroud of mist. A slight grin crept across her face, the last flicker of confidence before her fate sealed shut. She didn't know it yet, but the terror that had gripped Whitechapel had already reached out, its fingers curling around her. Fate had already set its course. Catherine's life had always been a battle. Born into the grinding hum of industrial life on April 14, 1842, in Graiseley Green, Wolverhampton, she was the youngest of 9 children. The loss of her mother when she was young carved deep into her soul, leaving a wound that never healed. Her father, a tinplate worker, struggled to provide for the family, but there was always something missing. They lived in the suffocating shadow of poverty, each day marked by the relentless struggle to survive. Her early years had been a blur of hard labor, working in tinplate factories, serving as a domestic servant. But work, though necessary, was never enough to bring her the stability she craved. Relationships came and went, each one more turbulent than the last. For 20 years, Catherine had lived with Thomas Conway, a man whose alcoholism and failures had worn down her spirit. They had 3 children together, but it was a life steeped in tension, wrapped in a blanket of unspoken resentment. Eventually, Catherine walked away, finding a fleeting sense of solace in the arms of John Kelly. They shared a modest life in the heart of Whitechapel, a life where survival was a constant struggle, but their bond, though frayed, held them together. Despite it all, Catherine had a fire in her. A woman with a sharp wit, an infectious laugh, and a resilience that, though battered by time, still managed to flicker in the darkest of hours. Even as she drifted through the slums of London, poverty and uncertainty gnawing at her heels, she could make you smile. A woman who could sing and laugh in the face of it all, even when the weight of the world seemed too heavy to bear. But on this night, none of it mattered. She had left John behind, seeking the cold comfort of a few extra pennies. The fog seemed to close in tighter as she walked, each step muffled by the thick night air. By 8:30 p.m., Catherine had been found drunk, slumped against the cobblestones near Aldgate High Street. A crowd had gathered, their whispers sharp and accusing, but a police officer had intervened, taking her into custody for her own safety. She would spend the next few hours in the police station, her mind clearing as the alcohol faded from her system. At 12:55 a.m. she was released, the sergeant's words of caution barely registering. "Be careful now," he said, his voice a thin thread of concern that disappeared into the fog as she stepped out into the cold night. "Good night, old cock," she replied with a crooked grin. And with that, Catherine Eddowes disappeared into the mist, a woman lost to the night, unaware of the monster waiting for her. At 1:35 a.m., Joseph Lowendo walked through Duke Street, his eyes drawn to a figure. He noticed Catherine standing close to a man, shabby clothes, a fair complexion, a small mustache. She was laughing, carefree, her voice floating through the fog like a bird lost in the night. For a moment, everything seemed normal. But nothing was. By 1:44 a.m., PC Edward Watkins was on his usual patrol, his boots echoing through the silence of Mitre Square. The lantern in his hand cast long, wavering shadows on the cobbles as he moved forward. Then, as if the world itself had frozen in place, he stopped. There, in the silence of the square, lay Catherine Eddowes, her body torn apart in ways that made the mind recoil. Her throat was slit so violently it barely clung to her neck. Her face, a grotesque patchwork of mutilation, gashes slicing through her cheeks, her nose ripped away. But the worst was yet to come. Her abdomen, grotesquely opened, her intestines spilled out like a nightmare-made flesh, resting over her right shoulder. The killer had taken more. Her left kidney and uterus, removed with terrifying precision, had been taken as trophies. The brutality of the act, the meticulousness of the removal, suggested a hand with knowledge. Perhaps a doctor, or a butcher, or perhaps someone twisted enough to know the anatomy of horror. The crime scene became a dark, terrible beacon of horror in the night. The quiet hum of the city outside seemed to evaporate as the police flooded into the square. Dr. Frederick Gordon Brown arrived and immediately took note of the surgical precision in the mutilation. Questions rushed through his mind. Who had done this, and why? The horror did not stop there. Nearly a mile away in Golston Street, police discovered a bloody piece of Catherine's apron. Scrawled above it in chalk were chilling words. "The Jews are the men that will not be blamed for nothing." What did it mean? Was it a message from the killer? Or a taunt, a final mockery left in his wake? It was impossible to say. But before the police could act on it, Commissioner Sir Charles Warren ordered the message erased, fearing it would stir anti-Semitic riots. A clue lost forever. The city trembled under the weight of what had happened. The murders of Catherine Eddowes and Elizabeth Stride, both claimed by the same hand within hours of each other, sent ripples of fear through every soul in London. The Ripper had struck again, this time with an efficiency and brutality that shook the city to its core. Catherine's body was laid to rest on October 8, 1888. But her death, like the others before it, left behind more questions than answers. The family she left behind could only wonder what had happened in her final moments. What had she felt? Had she seen him coming? The Ripper's motives remained a puzzle, his identity still a mystery. Why had he taken Catherine's organs? What was the significance of the mutilations? Did he kill again that night? Or had he disappeared back into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as he had arrived? The fog still clings to Whitechapel, thick with the unanswered questions of the past. What do you think? Do you have any theories? Share them in the comments below, and subscribe for more chilling true crime stories, because the nightmare that is Jack the Ripper is far from over.